Hi guys, Melissa Fisher here. Now, for you, those of you that don't know, property developer, I say by day, I am a coach, a mentor, an author, amongst many things, business owner. What I am, though, is very, very passionate about change. I love what I do on a day to day, otherwise, I wouldn't put the time and effort into it. And I am very happy today to be speaking to someone that is as passionate about what he does and why he does it as what I am. So, a lovely guy, amazing person doing incredible things. It is an amazing journey he has been on. So, I would love to welcome to the podcast Mr. Ian Ugarte. Hey guys, well, today I am here with Ian Ugarte. Well, Ian, it's been a while, I've got to say. It's been a long time since we've caught up, but I reckon I was thinking about it this morning. I reckon I've known you for 10, maybe 10, 11, 9, somewhere around about that. Some changes over that time?
Yeah, a few changes.
Some of it's life, some of it's all business orientation. I know I have seen the evolution of Ian, which has been incredibly exciting actually. So much there to unpack, but in a short period of time, we're here to talk about something very specific today. So before we get into it, how about you just do a bit of an intro of who is Ian?
Yeah, so I'm now 32 years into investing. So I bought my first investment property when I was 18. I was a first year apprentice in a family plumbing business, and typical ethnic family, my parents put a deposit on a house across the road. It was like, we're Spanish, but it was like my big fat great wedding, the house next door or house across the road. And so they put the deposit down on that. I got to live with my parents, and then we put a tenant in there, and all of my wage, well, I earned $222 after tax, and 200 went towards the house. Then the rent went towards it, and then I would keep $22. And people would say, "Well, you got an easy leg up there," and I go, "Yes, I did. It's a fortunate position that my parents were in, middle class family, to be able to do that." And what it did also mean was I didn't get paid any overtime. You start at 6 in the morning, you finish at the earliest 6 o'clock at night, and you worked Saturdays and sometimes Sundays in a family business. So I did work hard, and I got to learn a work ethic from my father, who was an incredibly hard worker, all the way up until he got sick recently and then couldn't work any further. But he was 76 when he got sick, and that stopped him from working. But the short end of that was that we kept that property for 2 years, 2.5 years, sold it, paid my parents back with interest, and that gave me my deposit for the first family home that I bought with my partner at the time. And it was a waterfront on the Hawkesbury River, which was awesome. But then we bought some extra properties as we went along, and those investment properties I thought were negative, but what it turns out to be was that the real negative geared property was the house that we're in, because we'd moved out of that and turned it into a rental, and it was costing us $22,000 a year. At that point in time, $36,000 negative cash flow every year. And I thought that's the way that you had to invest. I went along to the same person that Mel started with and saw that there was positive cash flow. So we sold, at that point in time, we had 7 properties, $36,000 negative. We sold down 6 of them. That turned us from 36 negative to 19 positive. And then we started buying again. The first property we bought was a resi-mercial, so commercial shop front, unit upstairs, unit behind, spent $70,000 on it, turned it around to $22,000 positive cash flow. It uplifted about $300,000. Then that got us into the next one. So everything was good. Started becoming a big block developer, so chopping up large pieces of land and selling off or building 4-bedroom houses on it, until I woke up one day, the unhappiest day of my life, where I was suicidal. That's the short version of what happened. And that meant that I had to make a change. And lo and behold, thankfully I had a life coach at the time, which Melissa also knows, and my partner at the time realized something wasn't quite right, and they managed to halt the process of ending life, which would have been really selfish in hindsight. And so we went looking for something that was going to give us positive cash flow, but that was going to be more about giving back to the community rather than taking from the community, like developers generally will do when they destroy the housing market. And we stumbled across this was about 2008, 2009, stumbled across the New South Wales state government releasing for the first time the ability to build a granny flat in your backyard and rent it to a second party. And I looked at it and I went, the numbers are okay, but is it really doing anything for community? And in the same policy, they had what they called the new generation boarding house, which was, you could build on a low density block of land, you could build 16 or however you could many fit, but generally 12 rooms is what you were going to put on there. So I started looking and started making the progress and making the mistakes and trying to find the person that was the expert. Couldn't find that person that had understanding about all the different legislation, and which we'll talk about today, and the different policies and the different compliance. So by default, finding experts in different area, I became the expert overall in co-living. So I started teaching people how to do this after making all the mistakes myself and fixing those mistakes, and wrote an education program. And then I realized that with the education program, I couldn't give people experience. So we ended up creating the business that just does it for you, really. And so where we're up to now is obviously we continue to do our own investments. I've got a unicorn deal that's happening right now, which is just the most bizarre deal you could ever imagine. I always say there's no perfect deal, and we haven't got to the end of this one yet, but geez, it's close. So yeah, we continue doing co-living, and that's the short of the long version of where I'm at.
Good, stop right there, because that unicorn deal I think we might finish on, hey? Let's not give them a sneak peek on that yet. Just something I want to touch on through that, though. You get to that point in your life. Now, through all of your investing, we've had many conversations about this in the past. Through many things that you've done, we all learn. Nothing's perfect. You take on the challenges. There's mistakes made along the way. You learn from them. You create great outcomes. There's cash flow that's considered. It really makes no difference in the whole scheme of it, does it? When it comes down to what's true to you, what's important, what is your contribution? Like, what are you actually here for? Why are you doing what you're doing? There's such a big question to ask yourself and really get your head around. And it is holistic. It's not a job. It's not this is what I do, this is who I am. And I think that's a point that gets missed with a lot of people when they're looking at investing. They're looking at investing in an asset, yes, but they're not looking at investing in themselves or their lives as a whole, and what impact they can have, what contribution they want to make, what that actually means. But this is something that for a long time I've seen in you, and I take that back to other projects you did, another course you did, all of this. There was this holistic aspect of contribution with you, relevant to how it plays out at the time. Like, we're all learning on the run on a good day when you're looking at things like this and you're finding, the greatest part of you and what that actually looks like. Can you just touch on a little bit of that for me? Because it's super, super important that people understand this, and they're going beyond that surface of it's just an investment, right? Because I know that this is not just an investment for you. It's a whole lot more than that.
There's so much to say about that, because, interestingly, when I first started investing and getting into all of this, it was about becoming the biggest property developer and owner in the country, we're in the world, I was going to be the biggest ever. And then life starts to evolve in front of you. And, I'm fortunate to have 4 daughters to my first wife, and I missed their life trying to build this massive portfolio. And then, in building that portfolio, I then started educating. I've got a degree in education. So I'm a plumber and a builder, and I've got a degree in education. I'm a real estate license in 5 states and 2 countries. So I'd been going down this path of being the biggest business person that you could be, only to find that I missed their life. And then also to find that the circle that I had entrusted in getting me to that level didn't have the values that I had. And that was really the catalyst of change for me, and that sad day. I always say I'm extremely fortunate for having the unhappiest day of my life, because it changed the way I did everything. And I often see people say to me, well, if you don't have to work, why are you still working? And I go, because firstly, I went home for 3 months, did nothing, and drove everyone insane. Secondly, and more importantly, is that if you don't have, if your focus is money, then you're gonna work out it's not. And I always say this quote: money doesn't make you happy, but you won't know until you get there, in which case it's useless me telling you. So everyone goes through the same journey of and not understanding. And I remember saying to people, what are you doing that for? If you've got that money, why aren't you doing something? Nothing, you know? And so as the evolution of who you are as a person, you know, you've been in masterminds, you know, alongside me in masterminds, and ultimately the end result is that those masterminds are hidden with the front face to be able to do something in the background. I no longer run, last time I ran mastermind was 2 years ago. So it gets to the point where you need some space. But for my last mastermind, one of the people that joined to become rich. And a lot of them do, right? And they're in a good position. And I'll say this about you, Mel. As a teacher, I could walk into a classroom and I could tell within 30 to 60 minutes who was going to make it in that class, who was going to be in the middle third and be okay, and who was going to struggle or do nothing, right? When I first met you in that mastermind where I was 2IC, I went that she's going to make it. It's gonna fast forward her in this mastermind, but she's going to make it anyway, right? So I was similar. I have that ethic of saying, I'm going to go in, I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it well, and I'm going to give it a good old crack. So amongst all of that, this guy had joined with his wife, and he was really quite, I won't say he was a misogynist, but he was really leaning towards I'm a man. At the end of 2 years, they'd turned their portfolio around, they'd replaced income. She got to leave her job. He still likes working, so he's still working. But more importantly, his development of himself as a man, as a person, and a guy with 2 daughters was something to see in front of me. I get out of bed every day to watch people change. That's my thing, right? And if I've got something to do with it, it ticks my box even more. So this guy had completely flipped to understand that and he came up with a quote, which we've got coffee cups that's on the quote that's on our coffee cups. And it says, I came here for the development of property and stayed. I came here for property and I stayed for the development.
Stay for the development.
So, yeah. And so that, your program, my program, people front face it with something on the outlet, right? You need cash flow. You need a way to be able to get there. But if you don't work on you and the benefit to you, but more importantly to others, then you're doing it for nothing.
And it is so true. And I think it's the hardest thing to get some people to want to see. You know, we look at all the old belief structures and all of these things, but when people get it, it is the most amazing thing to see when that penny drops and they realize what contribution is about, what they are all about, what's important to them. The money will be there. It absolutely will, but you can't force this, right? You've really got to understand you, and you've got to want to go there, and you've got to want to go there to that depth where you get to see the polarity, you get to see the amazement of who you are and who you are becoming, but you also get to see the other side of it, because without seeing that, nothing changes. And I think this is the amazement in watching that evolution. I say of self, but of others, and being able to be a part of that. One of the most incredible opportunities that we can ever be given.
I think one of the greatest things for me, the greatest tick boxes for me, is it's not so you go on and you reach the next tier, like if you want to look at spiral dynamics or whatever, but you step up to the next level. You don't know you've done it. You know that you've done it when you're talking to someone or you're relating to someone and they stop and they say, there's something different about you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that point in time where the recognition of, okay, so there is change. Something has happened, something has moved, because just my energy is different, or the way I say things is different, or the way I communicate, or how I'm more calm has made an influence for someone else to be able to see that. And I think that's the thing that you and I look, there's something different. You've thought differently, you look differently, you feel different. That's important.
It is important. So now that we know what's really important, because it's not the money, and yet the money's an enabler. It allows you to do what you do to a greater degree, to a greater extreme, and bring other people into it, employ people, all these things. Money is an immense enabler. So it's not to the exclusion of, but it's not the primary factor, right? There's a whole lot more that's important about that. We're going to have a chat about some co-living,
Yeah.
and ultimately Invita. So we've understood now where Ian started, what is, in the very short space of time, what you've learned along the way. Do you want to tell me what Invita is? Like, what is it? What is it to you? But what actually is it?
So, as I said before, I'm a Australian, first generation Australian to Spanish migrants, and Vida, as you all would know from the song "Living La Vida Loca," all the way to living the crazy life. So Vida is life, right? We tossed around how we were going to push the brand of who we are as a business and the values that we hold. And Invita, in life, is sort of how we came along with the name Invita. And Invita is about bringing life back into the housing market. It's about bringing life into first home buyers that can save themselves some money while getting rent, and paying off their house and having a family sooner. It's about bringing life back to the community by bringing back what we had in the 60s and 70s and 80s, a little bit of the 80s, where you grew up in streets where you knew everyone, but no one knows each other anymore. So we talked about bringing life into everything, including giving some life back to the government to let them concentrate on the low end of the market while we fix the middle of the market and the housing problem at middle class level. So Invita was created to be able to help people get into an end-to-end product result for co-living. Now, there's three aspects to Invita. You've got an existing property, you want to get it converted, we check the legalities, compliance, we say, yep, we go in, we have a construction team using my builder's license that converts a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, as an example, to a 5-bedroom, 5-bathroom, 5-kitchenette setup within 30 working days, including furnishing and staging and photography. And then at the other end, my wife, Holly, she manages the property management side of the business and fills those properties with, professionals over 55-year-olds. We can talk about that in more detail. So end to end, so you've got a property, we'll convert it. You haven't got a property, we'll find you an existing property, which is great for super funds because they have to do a one-part contract. So we buy the property and then the super fund does the renovation in cash. Or if you're an investor and you want cash flow quickly, so from engaging as a buyer's agency all the way through to the day that it starts to get rented is 5 months, including finding the property, contract period, application approvals, construction, furnishing. And then the other part of the business is purpose build. So we go out and we piece together the house and land package with the developer for the land, the builder for the house, and we sell you a finished product on a drawdown like you would normally buy a house and land. Along all of that, you're looking at double-digit returns, effectively looking 10, sometimes 14%, where you get some outliers, and you will net somewhere between 6.5% to 9.5% after paying all costs, including a loan on 100% of the property, which is pretty good going considering where the interest rates are at and the prices of properties nowadays.
Well, what I can tell you is, yes, very heavy in the commercial space, and we talk commercial having double-digit returns and being able to achieve those sort of returns. There is nothing else in the residential space that has not been pushed into a commercial sector that actually has returns like that. So I'm really interested for you to be able to map that out as we move through today, because that's insane from an investment perspective. But again, while we say the investment's great, I really do want to get to that focus on what co-living is, like what it actually enables, because an investor is going to come in for a return, and it's a great investment when you are investing in something that is meaningful to you and you understand what the benefits of it actually are. So very simply, what is co-living? Because this is what Invita is. You're creating a co-living environment. What is co-living?
So co-living is a buzz term. Right. It's a marketing term that I brought to the market. So if you ever hear the term HMO, house in multiple occupation, that is a term that I stole from the UK. They have a policy over there, a housing policy, and I brought that in when I taught the education. So if you see any business or company using the term HMO in Australia, thanks, Ian. Then you've got flexible living, and that's another buzz term for co-living. Co-living is a buzz term. Effectively, what we're talking about is rooming houses, boarding houses, communal residences. Depending on what state you're in, they'll be called different things. And so if you ever see the term co-living, understand that there's only one policy in the country that's called co-living, which is a policy that I wrote for the New South Wales state government. Unfortunately, the New South Wales state government took one part of my policy out, which is what I really wanted. And so I shouldn't have probably put too much emphasis on it, was that we didn't need to go to council to get approval. I'd rather go to a building surveyor and private certifier rather than council, because now I've got control, I can tick boxes and I can get approvals. So unfortunately, from the aspect of New South Wales, they have a policy called co-living, but it's not that easy to use, which is why I don't really do anything for clients in New South Wales. I'll do it for myself. So if we're using rooming house, boarding house, or communal residence policies around the country, it means that we need to get full approval and compliance. So that means that your building has to be a 1B building. So to explain a 1B building, you have to build a house or a townhouse or a villa in Australia, not units. They have to be what they call a class 1A building. So that's a brick veneer, lightweight construction, hay bale house, whatever you want to build. And that house just operates for one household to live in. So one household, the definition of that is a group of people that agree to live together, that are related by either blood, adoption, or friendship, and they share meals together and they go shopping together. That's the basic definition of a household. So if there's a rental property and it gets put up for rent, a group of friends come together, they sign a lease, all their names are on the lease, or a family signs and the parents are on the lease, that's called one household, right? They're reliant on each other, they pay bills together, they do all of that sort of stuff. So then what co-living is, using rooming house, boarding house, communal residence policies, is actually having individuals or couples taking areas of the house. Now, in a true definition of the old boarding house, it was like one shared bathroom and 10 rooms, which is not what we do. Co-living in how we do it is that everyone has their own bedroom, their own sitting area, they have their own kitchenette, their own bathroom, kitchenette depends on state, their own bathroom, and they share the common kitchen and the laundry. They never really visit the common kitchen because they've got the ability to use induction stoves approved and insured in their rooms. So because there's multiple people living together that don't know each other, so they're unrelated parties, they're not a household, they're multiple households. So you now need to change the safety and compliance of that building so that it ticks the box of, firstly, planning, secondly, construction code, thirdly, insurances. So a 1B building is exactly the same as the house you live in, with some changes. So the differences are, it has to be under 300 square meters, which most houses are, and you can't put more than 12 people in it. Now, depending on policy around the country, you're not going to be able to put more than 12 in there. The maximum is 12 people in one state, but other states are 5, others are 6, others are 4. So then the other 5 changes to the actual structure of the building is that you need to have disability access. So this is not NDIS properties, so don't confuse yourself with NDIS. So you have to have someone with a wheelchair be able to access into the house, every room of a house. So at least one bedroom, at least one lounge room, at least one kitchen, at least one laundry, and the backyard if it's required. So someone can, and so if there's a barbecue out the back, they have to be able to get to the barbecue. You then have linked smoke detectors that are in every room, and attached to those are emergency lighting, which are battery operated. So not the Running Man thing, it's just a downlight that turns on when smoke detectors go off, and they all go off together. So if someone burns toast, everyone's going to know about it.
No hiding from that.
No hiding. Then you've got fire extinguishers and safety blankets in specific spots. You have a door handle that leaves the property that is not lockable internally. Or if it is lockable, you push down on the handle and it'll unlock automatically. That's for person with a disability, so that if they need to get out during a fire, they don't have to go looking for keys or turn knobs. They can just push down and go. It's like, you know, when you go to a disability bathroom and you lock it on the inside and you push down, you're not sure it's locked or not. That's the one, right? And then the last one is just like a hotel. When you stand behind the door of every room, there's a map and says you're here. And if you need to get to safety, this is the direction of travel that you need to go. That's the only difference between a 1A and a 1B. And what that means is that we've got multiple households with insurances that we can get, with planning laws that we can approve, and with national construction codes that we are compliant with.
That's amazing, because now that creates opportunity. That creates a situation for people that can utilize it. And I know there's a whole lot of things we're going to touch off on further down, but just as a point at the moment, when you start looking at what this is actually creating, I challenge people to go, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Because we're going to address that. What is the first thing that comes to mind? I've been here on projects doing it. It's crazy. But what is the first thing that comes to mind? And really challenge yourself on why that came to mind. But look at the opportunities that are available for people that you know, for family members, you know, that the ripple effect of this and getting it right, because it's got to be right. It's not a random, let's just do it because it's a nice fuzzy feeling. It's got to be right. Every box has got to be ticked, so your insurances are in place. So people are being looked after in the way that they should be, right? That there's absolute safety in this. So while we go through the rest, I challenge everyone to give some thought to that and what that initial thought and feeling actually is. You got a 3-person model. Yeah, let's chat about that and some of the legalities around this, because we know there are some.
The 3-person model is my fault. And so if you ever hear it,
full responsibility.
if you ever hear about the 3-person model, you need to be very aware. So it's either going to be a 3-person model, or somewhere in extra loss of translation, people say a 3-bed model, right? But really it is a 3-person model. There are 2 states in this country that have government organizations to look after people in share houses or co-living houses, if you want to call it that. And those 2 organizations are very clear about when they kick in. So in Queensland, it's residential services. And in Queensland residential services, it says that if you've got 3 people or less, we couldn't care what you do in a house. If you've got 4 people or more, you now need to register as a residential service. You need to get us out to go and have a look at the property. It has to be a 1B for us to sign off on it, etc. Right? In Victoria, it's Consumer Affairs Victoria. And Consumer Affairs Victoria say, if we've got 3 people, it's not a rooming house. It's not required to be registered with health and wellbeing at the local council. So when co-living, so I was the idiot that was doing co-living since 2009, and I was going to lose my money and everyone was going to destroy my properties, and you're an idiot. It's now changed to everyone thinks co-living is amazing, and except that we're now killing the housing market, which is, you know, just the flip side of everything else, right? So when it came to the first batch of people converting themselves to co-living, when I say people, I mean building companies and developers, they started to mass market. And I was I still am the person that people come to and go, what's this about? So I had a whole bunch of clients come to me and going, I've just been hit on my feed with all of these advertisements for co-living. And so I looked into it. And I went, oh, so rang the building company. I said, hey, my name's Ian. I do co-living. And just happened to be that the person that answered the phone goes, oh, we know who you are. And I knew that they knew who I was because they were using all of my taglines all the way through their advertising, right? So I said, I'm just interested, is the plan that you've put up, is that the plan that you're marketing? And at that stage for this company, it was a 5-bedroom, 5-bathroom model. It was ridiculous. It had these tiny little rooms, which were about 9 to 12 square meters. And then they had this massive theater room with seats that you lay back on, and a communal area that have everyone sharing space together. And it had this altruistic kumbaya feel around it. And I said, firstly, I don't think you understand the terms of concept of co-living, because what you've designed is going to create more problems than actually give people outcomes. Because in designs, what you want to do is keep people away from each other, not because you don't want the problems, but people actually want their own space. And if you can give people their own space, if they want to talk to others, they will. Like, we specifically design all our floor plans to keep people in their spaces. That's easier to manage. It keeps people out of trouble. It keeps them happier, keeps them in the property longer, right? So I said, maybe this building company, I said, maybe it's worth me coming down, having a chat to you. So I went down, chatted to them, and I said, all right, you realize that you build one of these for your client, it's not going to be compliant. And it's also going to put them up for fines of up to $180,000 and 2 years jail time. And they go, no, we talked to the council, and the council said that it was okay. I said, can I see what you asked council? And I could see by the questions that they asked that they weren't really asking the right questions. So I said to them, let's have a meeting with your town planners. And so that was the next step. And so I then, rolled out basically that from a planning perspective, you can't have multiple households in a dwelling. Like, you just cannot do it, because the number one safety from a planning perspective at council is 4 or 5 people move into a house today. There's a fire tonight, and they're just going to go out the front door and save themselves. But if that was a family of 4 or 5, the parents in that house are going to die trying to get their kids out. Absolutely. Right? That's the difference between the two. So the town planners go, yeah, we agree. I said, so the questions that you asked weren't really the right questions. And the town planners go, no, I suppose it's not. And so then I said to the builder, I said, and look at this section of policy where it says residential services. This was Queensland. And the look on the builder's face was priceless, because the realization was that they just spent $100,000 on design, advertising, marketing, and they missed the actual goalposts. So I then signed myself up as a consultant to them, and we redesigned. And so they had sold a bunch of 3-bed models which weren't compliant. I said, they're not compliant. And I said, to make them compliant, we have to put disability in, we have to do. So they weren't a very good listening company. So what they decided to do, knowing that the 3 people or less was government department that they were going to fly under the radar, they decided to sell co-living as a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom model, with the 3rd and 4th bedroom having an interconnecting door so that it could be used as a lounge as well. So all of these 3-bed models or 3-person models that you're seeing across the country are completely illegal. So that's because if you go to council won't say, no, you can't use that. That can only be 1 family in there.
Let's get back to why we do what we do, right? Everything's good till something goes wrong. And now you've created this outcome with, initially, they may well have had the best of intentions, but they've created this, didn't listen, they've put a whole lot of it out into the market. And when something goes wrong, it's generally detrimental to someone else's life. And in these situations, and we've seen it in boarding houses, you've seen it, it's not a new thing. When something goes wrong, it's super challenging. And like you've just mentioned, as a family, everyone knows where everyone is, what's going on, and it's all together, and you're out, everyone is, and mum and dad are going to go to the end of the earth to make sure that happens. But when you're not a family, first, you don't even notice who else is there, nor are you turned back to have a look and see. So inevitably, when something goes wrong, it's seriously detrimental. And you have been a part of allowing that to happen. How do you manage that? Because at the end of the day, while everything's rosy and money's hitting the bank and we go, and this is a great investment because we've done it for the money, that's sweet. But when something goes wrong, you've got to live with that. You've got to deal with the fact that you know that this is not right. And that's what I have a big challenge with.
And my problem is that in that consulting, I withdrew my consulting as soon as so what they did was they engaged me through a lack of integrity to find out how they could reinvent by circumnavigating a grey area. And it's not grey, it's really black and white as far as I'm concerned. So I had to remove myself from that position. And so then multiple businesses have then joined. And I've spoken to 20 builders in the last year, about how their plants are not compliant and they're not selling compliant product.
Mm-hmm.
5 of them have said, oh, no idea. What do we have to do to get them right? Because we don't want to be there, right? 15 of them said, we're told it's okay. And I said, I'm telling you it's not. And here's the reason why. No. We got someone else to tell us. Let's have a meeting with those people so we can confer between all of us. No. So from my perspective, the 3-bed model wasn't my design. It was they found out what they needed to find out, thinking that they knew, and went ahead with it. And so what happens is, you raise a good point. It takes something bad to happen before all of that gets pulled up. Now, I don't know if anyone's old enough to remember the Childers backpacker fire, but that backpacker fire changed all the fire codes across the country. One of these coming up is going to create massive damage. And we already know that there's private certifiers and building surveyor organizations, so head organizations, that are saying if it quacks like a duck, it's duck. So if you think you're doing co-living and it's on our radar, we're going to start nailing the certifiers or surveyors, and that'll stop pretty quick.
It's interesting, right? Again, if you are asking questions and you're not pushing hard enough to challenge, is there a no in there? Is there a this is not right in there? If you're not prepared to push that hard, you're generally trying to hide behind something. You're generally trying to sneak under the radar with something or sweep something under the carpet to go, it's okay. And I'm going to challenge everyone on that to go, is it really okay? Because it's okay now, but are you prepared to live with what can potentially happen because you've let that slip under the radar or swept it under the carpet? What comes off the back of that? Because that's not something I'd ever want someone to have to go through for the sake of saying, we can redesign this, Ian, we can do it right. Okay, it's cost us a bit of money, but put it down to education, right? Let's actually do this because there's integrity and meaning behind what we're delivering. They're not delivering a model based on integrity and what's important to them. They're delivering a money-based model based on money. And goes back to our first point, it's beyond that. It's beyond the dollar figures. It's beyond the returns. It's your contribution. It is what's important to you, and it's creating that serves others. That is where authenticity and integrity actually come from.
Yeah, and what's the cost to you as a person from the anxiety? Because I never give my non-compliant story from me, but I was, 12 years ago, a non-compliant investor. I was putting converting the garage illegally and doing this and doing that. And it all came to head all at the same time. It's like some force decided to hit me with the brick because I wasn't listening to the paper cuts, that's for sure. And so I got done on 2 different properties for illegal works. I then luckily I managed to save my driver's license. And I went to my business life coach at the time and I said, I don't understand this. They're just picking on me and I couldn't see it. It was too close to my face.
Yeah.
And she said, write it all out for me. And I wrote it out. And the next meeting with her, she said, do you want me to tell you the truth? And I said, well, that's what I'm here for. She says, you're just a non-compliant lying person. And I was shocked. And I said, but how? And so then we went through this whole process and, then it was like, oh, I get it, right? So I'm putting other people at risk. I'm doing the wrong thing again. So ultimately, it took me about 18 months after that point for the little non-compliances to raise their head here, there, and everywhere. And I've suffered from anxiety from my teenage years. And here I am creating more anxiety, worried about the next thing that's going to happen. So there's the cost to you personally, there's the cost to the community, possibly the cost of life inside the house if you get it wrong for co-living.
Just a really quick point on that, right? Because I know we've still got a lot to get through. I mean, I'm constantly saying everyone does the best they can with the information and knowledge and awareness that they have at the time. It's our choice to change that, right? So we want to do things differently. They're all our choices to change all of this. And personally, I believe that I want to say everyone, and I get challenged on this a lot, but I don't have time as a totally different conversation, that everyone is acting with the best of intention based on their perspective, right? Mm-hmm. So by no means are the majority of people going out, let's be non-compliant, let's do all these things wrong so I can damage things. That's not how it is. In our mind at the time, you the best of intention behind it, and this is what we want to create, and this is how we're going to do it. It's a construct that we get caught up in, and when it all comes to a head because we haven't listened, and if you are ever one that really wants to evolve as a person and challenge yourself and be that greatest version of, you will have that whack. You will have that moment where it all comes flying through and gives you the greatest whack, and all of a sudden there's a whole lot of tears that go, what the hell was that? The greatest moments in time, like you say, maybe the saddest and hardest, but also the greatest moments in time. I say it's where freedom actually comes from. That realization is where the ultimate in freedom comes from. So let's talk about who lives in these, because I did challenge people before to go, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you're thinking co-living? Really quickly, I remember doing a project many years ago now, and I put it in front of the town planner, and you'd already spoken about this, right? So it shouldn't have been such a surprise. But when I heard her say to me, we don't want those sort of people in our town. And I was taken aback, and I took a step back and I went, no, it's actually for real. They think this, like, this is for real. Like, and it came out of a council town planner's mouth. And standing there at that moment, I just went, how? Just why? How did you see out of all of this? How is that what you got to? So what is it that they think? What is it that people often believe that co-living or shared living or rural, whatever you want to call it at the time, what do they think it actually is?
Yeah, so they're relating it to the old boarding house, which is really the place that, you know, dirty old men go to because they can't afford to go anywhere else. And, you know, they're either alcoholics, they're unemployed, you know, but I used to get it all the time. Drug dealers, bikies, criminals, pedophiles. I'm going, like, firstly, the first few, you know, I know some bikies and they've got good incomes, like, you know,
Yeah.
and most of them legit, right? So they've got legitimate income coming in. I'm happy to have them in my property. They're probably going to protect everyone in the property and look after the place well. So, you know, this theory that all bikies are bad, forget it. But the fact that people automatically go, there's going to be pedophiles. Now, I've been involved with numerous cases as a industry expert at council planning meetings, where I've basically been engaged by council or a client to represent the boarding house or communal residence or rooming house going through council. And, you know, it's always the same thing. It's just up the road from a school, and that's going to endanger the children. Why? Well, because they could be pedophiles. I go, there's probably more pedophiles in the schools than there are outside it. You know, let's be serious. Like, if building a co-living property was going to attract pedophiles, and that would be a really easy thing to police, to arrest people, because if that's the attractant. But so that sort of process of thinking is really coming from an old age, risk averse community aspect.
It's
And
fear-based though. It's so fear-based based on what they don't know.
correct. Yeah. And so I started building these for myself, making mistakes that I made. And I reckon, you know, 2009, 10, 11, I probably lost in mistakes. Like, when I say lost, let's call it a negative profit, or my HEX fee, two odd $1 million, I reckon, in what I could have saved myself.
Yep.
And in that whole process of doing that, we started putting these properties to market. We started putting them out to rent. And then there's a knock on the door from an older lady, 55 plus, 50, 55 plus. And I go, oh, what are you doing here? Oh, yeah, I've just had to split up with my husband, and I don't have, my divorce came through. There's no kids at home anymore, so I don't really get a lot. And I've worked for the last 30 years in the home, so I don't have any super. And I don't have any qualifications, or any qualification I did have when I first started before I had a family is now lost. So I can't get a job, or I have a job, but it doesn't pay that well. So I can't afford a full house. And I do still like to go to dinner or lunch with my friends, and I still like to get my hair done. And I need somewhere reasonable that's presented nicely, that's a home for me. And I go, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then the next one would turn up and say, oh yeah, my husband passed away, and he had all the income, and there wasn't a lot left after paying medical bills and bits and pieces. So I'm really lost here. And other than, you know, moving in with my children, I need my independence. And that continued. So I started doing the research, and by all the research that we put together, we worked out that the biggest growing demographic of homelessness in this country right now is the 55-year-old single female, which would just blew me away. I couldn't believe it. So I said, well, I'm going to fix this problem. And so I went out and I filled a house with 55-year-old women, and they tried to kill each other. It was I've never seen anything like it. It was crazy, right? And so I then realized that like with like wasn't going to work too well either. So we started to develop what we call a sixth sense. So the sixth sense in the property management side of it, actually, we might talk about it a bit later. Essentially, you develop a sense of how to piece a house together. And so we would put a matriarch in the house, and then we build around her. And, you start to get this formula that starts to work. And then we had professional singles and couples. Singles 22 to 35-year-old. So they've either studied or still studying, but they've got a full-time job. They're working their way up. They're a nurse, a lawyer, accountant, lower in the office, or they're a project manager or a tradie. And then you've got the 30 to 45-year-old couples. So the 30 to 45-year-old couples is she's starting to push 40 and she wants to have children, but they've spent their money well going out to dinner and bars on a Friday night. And so she says, I want to have kids, but I don't want to have that until we have our own home. That's a very Australian thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Overseas, they'd root like crazy, have 3 kids, and then worry whether they could afford it or not, right? So in Australia, though, different story. So they move in, they have a double income, eat takeaway food, hardly use any of the property. They're there late at night, and then they leave early in the morning. 3 to 5 years, they've got enough money saved for their own home. They move out, she has kids. So they're really basically the 3 type of middle class that come into the properties. And everyone from our position and what we put into properties, everyone employed, and we make sure that they can pay bills, because ultimately in the end, if we have to chase people for money, for rent arrears, for all of those problems, it makes our job hard. And then the clients aren't getting their money anyway. And I see a lot of co-living models that have shared bathrooms in them. We do not do shared bathrooms. There's also a property management group out there that doesn't care whether it's approved or not approved. We will only manage approved properties. It's the only way we will go forward.
So that brings me down to who does manage them?
Yeah, so we do. So I'm in an incredibly fortunate position. The marriage to Christine, my first wife, went for 23 years. We sort of grew apart in different areas, and a reasonably amicable separation. And so I was back on the market, and, just waited for all the knocks on the door, and I don't know why I didn't get anything. So I did what I had done with multiple students in the past that I was mentoring, and I sat down on New Year's Day on the beach at sunrise, and I wrote a list of 32 points of what I was looking for in my next life partner, and hopefully my last life partner. And so I wrote this list out, and I send it to a friend of mine and yours, Brad. And Brad sends me back a message. He goes, dude, like, that's a unicorn. You're not finding that. I won't tell you what was on the list. So effectively what I did was, because I'd had the list with when I met Christine, and I flipped the list around really and added some bits and pieces. So you get better at writing these things as you get older. So anyway, I'm sitting in an event, in a mastermind event, because I'm as a participant, because we all evolve at different levels. So I'm sitting in an event, and I shouldn't have had my phone on, and I had it on, and a notification came up from social media. I went, oh, so this lady had contacted me for some advice previously. So myself and her ex-husband were going to do some business together. I didn't feel his integrity and values were in line with mine, so I didn't, right? And so our families had dinner together a few years earlier. She then contacted me and said, oh, look, I'm going through a split up. And she said, I just want to know, did you do any business with this guy? And I said, no, I didn't. And that was the end of that. So anyway, so she then sent me another message, I'm looking at investing. And I went, oh, okay. So we did a quick meeting, and we worked out that she was single income nurse and couldn't get a loan. She lived in New Zealand, and so couldn't get another house anyway. So she had her own property, but just didn't have the income. So then this notification pops up in the middle of this event. It was a 3-day event. It was a 3-day event and it was the Saturday. So morning. And so it opens up and she's posted her divorce papers. And so it turns out that she was feeling bad about it. And at work, someone said, you shouldn't be feeling bad that you just received your divorce papers. Like, let's just step on, move on. Right. So she'd already been, apart from him for 3-4 years and the finalization happened. So I sent her a message. I said, oh, single again. And she goes, unfortunately, yes. And I said, well, how about a cup of coffee? And she goes, oh, if you, whatever. You're thinking, here's this Australian businessman. He won't go across and come have a coffee. So I go across for a cup of coffee with her for dinner. And COVID hits.
Didn't come home for a while.
Thankfully, it worked out because I was stuck in New Zealand for 4 months. I couldn't get home with a whole bunch of other Australians. Anyway, so she's an ED nurse. We got married. She moves in, and so we move in to Australia. She moves across to Australia. She has an ED job at Sunshine Coast Hospital, but COVID's still rampant. And I say, well, just work in the business. Yeah. I've never seen anyone pick up tasks and processes. She hates doing it, but she is so good at doing it. And she, within 4 weeks, she took 2.5 jobs down to 3 days.
Beautiful.
And her secret is she hates working. So the least amount of work she can do, the better off she is, right?
Yeah.
So we started our property management business. The GM we thought was doing a good job, as it turns out wasn't. And so Holly had to step in as CEO of the property management side of the business. So she is absolutely killing it. She's absolutely making it the best business for the clients that you could ever imagine. We're getting double and triple rents than a normal rental. We've got Victoria, we've got 0 vacancy at the moment. In Queensland, we've got 2 rooms available. Like, we manage thousands of rooms, and this need and demand's huge. So she manages the properties, and she manages the managers, really. So the way that our business is structured is our head office is here on the farm on the Sunshine Coast. We've got 40 acres up here with the offices on there. And we then manage on the ground staff that are employed by us, not contractors. And so effectively all communication for clients and tenants is from head office. And then on the ground, all the inspections, open houses are done by our staff. So we manage. We charge more, like most co-living. Every room in a property is equivalent work and a little more than a whole house. So when you might be paying 5 or 6% in Victoria or 9% in Perth, we're charging 13.2, including GST, 1 week letting fee. And we'll only do that once every 6 months. We won't charge a relet fee. When you look at the matrix of all the charges from all the different co-living companies, there's not a huge amount of them out there. We're the most efficient, effective when it comes to pricing. So people always say 13.2%, how can you justify that? I go, well, we just took your rent from $700 to $1,900, like we've got a property here. The biggest conversion we've done was 298 square meters. So remember that you can't go over 300. We were sweating on those 2 square meters not being more than 2, going over. So this property is probably the best conversion we've done as far as the outcome. It's 4 full 1 bedrooms. 2 of them are the size of granny flats. And then there's a decent sized studio, which is a double garage, right? Oh. That there on the Sunshine Coast would rent for $750 normally. It's pulling in $2,240 a week, and the whole area no vacancy. So we credit
to you though. Then when you're going, vacancy rate is zip, right? So this says a lot for the product itself, but also the management of it. Right? Yeah. To have people that want to stay there, and I dare say there's a lineup that's going, hey, when is the next one available?
That's interesting because we've built a database of people that need to go somewhere, and people that are looking. The simplest way to tell you how much rent you're going to get for a room is the same as a 1-bedroom apartment in the local area. Because a 1-bedroom apartment, you think, but why would someone take a room when you can take a whole apartment for yourself? utilities are included up to a certain amount. That you only have to look after one area of the house.
Yeah.
The tenancies are a little bit more flexible, but from the client, from the landlord side, we've got much more flexibility.
Yep.
Because you've got unrelated parties, as soon as someone goes out of sorts, we've now got powers to say, hang on, there's other people in the house that could be at risk. We need to do something about you. And we don't have many of them. I've actually, very proud to say, never been to tribunal anywhere in the country. Always been able to manage out. And that's because, like I said, the sixth sense is about developing how do you piece a house together? How do you make it work? So when you look at a one-bedroom apartment, you've got to pay for electricity, and you're on the lease and you're on the hook and all of that sort of stuff. So that makes it easier for people to go to co-living. And yeah, the vacancy rate is so low and the demand is so high.
It's also understanding why people want what they want.
Mm.
Right? Instead of judging and making assumptions, when we understand why the way of living is changing and what people are actually looking for and what's important to them, it makes sense. Because it's easy to judge. It's easy to make these assumptions of why it exists and what it is and all the rest of it. If you're prepared to take a little bit of time and understand why living arrangements are changing, what that means to people, it makes perfect sense, right? I think it's an incredible product.
And the thing about it is that someone's in the situation right now that needs to move quickly. And when I say quickly, within the next 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, they might already be in share accommodation, but they've got to share a bathroom and they don't quite like that. And we fully furnish all our properties to a really high standard. And that full furnishing means that people only have to bring their clothes, And so at the moment in Perth, we've got some areas in Perth where our managers on the ground over there are saying, we need more. We filled a house before it was even finished furnishing. Everyone had signed leases. So the day it was finished and ready to be moved into, there was no advertising. It was straight in. And so that database thing, they're there. And you remind people, and some people will say, oh yeah, but I've just signed something for 4 months. No problem. We'll keep it in the database and we'll send something out in 4 months, put a reminder in, and lo and behold, they'll generally move across.
That says a lot for your product. So you mentioned earlier NDIS.
So the National Disability Insurance Scheme was brought in to be able to streamline helping people with disability in their funding model. Now, in theory, it was a good theory. For those of you who remember the pink bats government spending, this is the equivalent of the pink bats. I have a basic rule. When you mix socialism and capitalism, socialism doesn't come first, right? And so what happened here was that when NDIS was first announced and before it was even rolled out, I was sitting on a board for a disability support service, a business association called Parent to Parent, one of the largest organisations in the country when it comes to disabilities. And they had a database. So effectively what the government did was, we've got funding, we've got organisations that then help distribute the funding to their clients. But what we're doing is paying them an excess amount of money. So we're going to move them out of the way and we're going to deal directly to the people with a disability. Well, these people with a disability have never filled out an application in their life. Yeah. And so then they created within NDIS what they call an SDA, a special disability accommodation. So that is a house that's going to be built and is being built by private industry. And then that government would put a lease on behalf of the participant on the house. The numbers thrown around, especially for people with high physical or robust needs, was huge. We're talking 16, 20%. The idea of NDIS was to get people out of nursing homes and hospitals into community around other housing so that they could integrate and do all that sort of stuff. So, of course, the capitalists saw that. Now, I started working with Parent to Parent to build their property portfolio because they were just about to lose all their income. And in building their property portfolio, I realised that the goalposts that kept on changing or moving or weren't even up. Like there was goalposts lying on the ground. They didn't even know where to put the goalposts. That's how badly rolled out it was. So then all the capitalists jumped onto it. And I decided then and there, I was actually going to create an education program on how to ethically invest in NDIS SDA housing. And I decided not to. And the reason was, and I also decided never to invest one myself because I thought it was less risky to go to a mining town than investing in an SDA. And so as it turns out, all of the capitalists that went out there and sold these houses to people didn't tell the full story because there's so many multiple moving parts to an SDA property that if you don't have all the parts together, you're done. And so as an example, you build a house, it's at a certain level, it might have 3 or 4 rooms in it. You have to find an organization or a different organization to go and find a participant that wants to live in that house in that area. Now, there was a court case where there was 3 rooms, someone moved into 1 and then tried to move a second person in. The first guy went to court and won the court case to say, no, this is my home, you can't put another one in there. So that moved the goalposts again. So these 16% promised returns, if they're full, are great. Now, the problem is that the participants and where they've built them are not there. I had a client, well, not a client now, but they rang me and said, I've got an SDA in Townsville. It's been empty for 3 years. I can't even put a family in it because I've got all these disability bathrooms and they look disgusting and there's other choices. So they take the other choices. So I go, okay, well, how about it's already technically a 1B property I just need to put some smoke detectors in and some signage, change a door handle, and we can convert your property to a co-living, right? So that's now happening. Now, all of these companies and builders that have built SDA and NDIS have now flipped across to co-living. And be wary of the fact that they were doing NDIS for the money and now they're doing co-living for the money. And so if you're going to invest with one of these companies, it may not be compliant and their ethics aren't in line with where they should be to help the.
I was going to say, it comes back to that very initial point we spoke about, wasn't it? Why are you doing what you're doing? Even from an investment perspective, when we're looking for investors, we're looking for people that align with our product, that align with what we're doing. There's a reason for that. There's a very valid reason for it. And this has come up multiple times through this conversation, right? So it's a very, very fair point to put out there to people. Be really conscious. If you're going to go and invest in something like this, there's product out there, check the ethical side of it. Like really start looking at why you're doing what you're doing and who you're doing it with, because the outcome that you are expecting or hoping to get may not be exactly what you get if it's not done properly. So there's, a really, really good point when we come down to co-living. Is it ethical or are we actually just doing more damage? Like, what are we creating here?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great point. One of the very, very important things that I haven't said yet, which is the demand perspective, is that when you look at census data, from 2006 census all the way through to the current census, and there's a new one that'll be done in a couple of years, the data is significantly showing a change in the household size. So that is, late 90s, average size household was, the amount of people in a house was 3 or 4 people, 5 people. Yep. And then it started to get smaller. So when we look at household size now, about on average across Australia, 68% of all households are singles or couple households. So that means that out of all the dwellings in Australia, the majority of them only have 1 or 2 bedrooms. Now, the same data on its flip side is that when we look at new houses that come onto the market or new homes, the majority of them are 4-bedroom houses, about 65 to 70%. So we've got households getting smaller, but houses getting bigger. So effectively, we're building the wrong product for what the market wants. And interestingly enough, my sad day was because I was producing those things and realizing that it wasn't, and I didn't know back then why. Now I know why. So when we talk about co-living, we're actually providing a marketplace for the people that need it most. So if 70 to 80% of the people right now looking for accommodation are singles or couples, and the majority of houses are available a 3, 4, or 5 bedroom, then effectively they're paying too much for them. And they have to, and they will, the majority of 4-bedroom houses will get rented to a couple ahead of a family. So that's a ridiculous thing. as agents around the country will have two applications. They'll have an application of a family of 4 with 2 young kids and a couple, and they will go the couple because they don't want damage to the property.
Minimum damage. Yeah.
So what we do with co-living is, let's use the example of a conversion. Okay. We've got a 4-bedroom house and someone just moved out of that 4-bedroom house. Doesn't matter who. Let's say a couple lived in that house.
Yep.
We've now got other houses that have got singles and couples in the area. So we go and convert that front door into 4 front doors. Effectively, we put our co-living rooms in there, which have their own bathroom for each person and their own kitchenette. So that means that the couple that moved out can move back into that one. They're going to save themselves 1/3 to 1/2 off their normal weekly rent, with utilities included. So they're better off.
They're way better off.
There's 3 other houses where the singles and couples are living, and they look across and they go, hey, I could be saving myself 1/3 to 1/2. I'll hand in on lease, I'll come across. So by them coming out of those houses and living in one house as a unit, we've now freed up 3 family homes so that families can actually move into them and pay less because they're paying more to get the bigger places. So what we're doing is creating more doorways for people to be able to save themselves some money, live comfortably, and hopefully buy their own home within 3 to 5 years. We're doing good for the marketplace. And not only that, we talked about the middle class. When you and I grew up, there was a middle class. That middle class has disappeared. You're here or you're here. 1/3 of the housing waiting list was what used to be referred to as middle class. So by providing more housing for people on the top of the housing waiting list, which are middle class professionals on jobs, tradies, all the rest of it, we're now lifting the pressure on the government, and the government can concentrate on what they do best: social housing. Not our job, not the private industry's job, just we look after middle class, they can look after. So no one loses, because then the owner of the household by default gets double to triple the income. No one loses out of co-living. It's an ethical investment for the community, for the people that live in it, for the landlord, and for governments.
And it's a choice. You're not forcing anyone to do anything, right? It's a choice. So the fact that you have a waiting list and a database and you've got 0 vacancy, we're going, well, it's a choice that people are making for a lot of reasons. That planner that was the one that said, we don't want those sort of people living in our area, she had 8 kids. And the conversation had gone down the lines of those people really got a question for you, because you're still working, right? And you have 8 kids that are going to leave home. Where are they going to go? Like, what are they going to live in? Can you afford to buy them all a house? Can you afford their rent? For her, it was one of those light bulb moments where she'd never even thought of it, right? And all of a sudden it's like, well, yeah, where are they going to live? And what is that going to look like? So over time, that planner and her moment that just really shook my world, holy hell, had gone full circle to coming around to go, we actually need things like this, because we can't afford to give to our kids what we want them to have. We've got 8 of them, right? We can't afford that. They're going to want it. They're going to leave home with a job. What's that job going to afford them? Like, where do we fill the gap? And this is an incredible model that is done ethically. It's a choice. And we're seeing very clearly that people are making that choice for whatever reason it is in their life. It's irrelevant. And when you say nobody loses, the investment, we need investors. We need people to invest in good product, right? So they get to win.
And, to be honest, investors have ruined this marketplace, but that's the government's doing.
Again, we get back to everyone is doing the best they can with the information, knowledge, and awareness that they have at the time. Okay. An interesting concept. It was a conversation I was having with someone else recently, and it had done my head in because there was a lot of investors involved, but I'm going, they've missed the point of what this is. And that frustrates the crap out of me. I'm like, they just don't get it. But the reality moment was, we need them. We need investors to be able to keep things moving, right? And they're there to make money. They are. And what they choose to do with that and how their life evolves are their choices. We don't actually have to control that. But again, they get what they get because they've invested in a good model, in a good product that's doing good for the community. The people that are living there are making good choices around their life and getting ahead of the game and filling that gap of where to from here, right? So they're making some good choices, and you've delivered something to the market that's enabling all of that. So you should be pretty happy, A, with that sad day, but certainly with what you are doing and delivering now. And how does that make Ian feel today?
We had our team meeting, our annual team meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we started coming together about, legacy, and legacy is really just another word for ego. But things happen, right? And sometimes you either take it as an ego thing or just go, oh yeah, okay, I'll accept that that's part of the market. We started talking about what we wanted to leave as a legacy until someone said, Ian, who did co-living in 2009? I go, oh, there was a couple generational families that were doing standard boarding houses, but really, like, it was me who sort of moved into, is this an investment strategy that mum and dads can use? And by 2016, when I did release it to the public, they said, we're going to continue to be, our legacy is going to be compliance.
Yeah.
But look at the market that you have single-handedly created, you and bringing it to the market. Yeah, there's other players in there, but when it comes to it, and this is without ego, all the co-living that you see advertised sitting in front of you right now had a part to play with my team. And that there's a lot of emotion based around. I think that I could have controlled the marketplace better. And when I say that, what I mean is that maybe it was inevitable, but I am concerned about the lack of compliance out there with co-living right now. And I created a market to compete against me because of the original model of teaching people this, which is, you live, you learn. Thankfully I've got a Kiwi wife, so off to New Zealand we go, and we do it right there. So I think from the perspective of legacy, I can say that I played a part in moving the investment strategy in Australia to something that's actually, when done right, is benefiting everyone, and I'm really happy about that.
Good. You should be happy about it. And the fact that you've been through a lifetime of learnings and growing and challenges and mistakes and all of this, and you kept going. Because so many people, they give up and they, oh yeah, we'll do something different. Oh yeah, it is what it is. But you kept going. So this is an integral part of who you are, and you're prepared to take on your challenges, not just the external challenge, but your challenges to actually keep this alive, to evolve it, and ensure that you're delivering what is super important to you. So I think it's amazing. I thank you for that because, like I said, people give up and never fulfill what is truly important to them, which is great for them, but it's also great externally too. So I thank you for that. The industry thanks you for that, because without it, whoa, where it was headed, not great. Really, really not great. And the ripple effect off it takes time. So while you create competition, you do what you do well, you'll always get what you choose off the back of that, and that will be amazing. And the competition that comes into play, we can all hope that they listen. They take on board the compliance side of it, because that's where the biggest difference is going to be made for the livability of this country by choice. Amazing as always. Super, super cool to see. Now, I know we are going to leave some links in the notes here for everyone to be able to click on and speak to you and all the rest of it. Well, want to ask any one parting thing that you would like to instill into anyone listening, as well as the quick flip on how do I get hold of you guys?
Yeah, I mean, to get hold of us, Invida, invida.com.au, get on there. I think we didn't talk about the unicorn, and what I'd say to you,
Please do.
what I'm about to say is probably linked to all of that. I've had many mentors throughout my life, and still a lot of them attached to me. My first mentor said the road to disaster is paved with good intention, and she's been right every time. So,
we love her.
yeah, and so as an outcome from that, another mentor said to me, "This too shall pass." All those times where you have the shittest days, or you're 12 hours from ending your life.
Yep.
Just know that it doesn't matter where you're at, that's going to pass. And then one day, and it's almost like we program ourselves, I am so happy. And then that too passes, right?
That will pass. That too shall pass. Absolutely.
I said there's no perfect property deal, and you know, I've been close to a couple in the last 32 years. I started doing a lot of consulting work to governments, state governments and local councils around the world, being the now expert. And so I was in Australia, but overseas. That'll tell you where I was, and working from council to council. And I came across this one council, and I remember growing up in a house in Sydney in a suburb near the airport, and you know, I had this really ethnic renovated house by my father. Next door was an asbestos cladded house. The other side of us was a Greek family, across the road, a German family, you know, and all the kids used to play out on the street. And you know, my next door neighbor was Auntie Carmel, and I didn't realize until the age of 11 that she actually wasn't my auntie. She was just the woman next door. And that whole thing of community was the basis of when I walked into this town down in Tasmania. I went, this feels like the same community I grew up in.
Yeah.
So we started looking at investing down there, and the council actually said to the meeting, you know, we've got one residential property on our portfolio and we have to employ 2 people for it. It doesn't make any money. There's older people in there. Would you like to buy it? The only caveat is you can't rent it out for more than $80 a week to them. And and they have to be pensioners and they have to have grown up in the local area. So I said, no problem. So I put a caveat on it that I had to do that. We bought this property, went to 2 years later, it's doing more consulting down there, and Homes Tas says, we're looking for a property for, you know, pensioners and retirees. I went, I got one of those. So 2 years later, I sold that property for double to Homes Tas with the same caveat put on top of it. So then I went and did a development in this town, and I bought an old factory, and we built a 3-meter corridor through the middle and 7 single-story lofts on each side. They're 38 square meters. So downstairs is like a 4 by 5 meter room, and upstairs is a bedroom and bathroom. So living room, kitchen, downstairs, upstairs. Everyone in the local area were going off their nut. This is not going to work. This is not going to, this, you know, you're a mainlander. You got no idea. And I go, but I've got the same values that you have. I don't think you understand that. Anyway, there was a Facebook page that devoted their whole life to ruining this development. And I just made one thread comment in there. And I said, I'm only going to do this once. Here's a list of my answers to all the issues that you've got. And I didn't hear anything back from them. So they must have listened, whatever. Anyway, so there's a guy down there who's a developer. He's now 80 something, and his nickname is God. That's what the local community calls him. He's a churchgoer. His name's Ken. And we went to a meeting, and he was at the meeting, and he doesn't say a lot, Ken. Went away from the meeting, and one of the local coffee shop owners goes, I just got a call from Ken. He doesn't have your number. He wants to meet you. So I went down there, and at that meeting, I told them what I was doing and my specialty area. And Ken said, don't listen to anyone in this city. You do what you think is the right thing to do. I built villas in the 60s, and they all said the same thing. So no one built these things. We were going to keep them all. We ended up selling 12 of the 14.
Okay, so a little bit earlier, you mentioned this unicorn thing that was going on. How about we finish this on that note?
Yeah. The unicorn thing is we got contacted. We were told we've got land. We're happy to sell you the land at value or general's value. So that's cheaper by about 35%. We'll do a contract with you, pay the deposit. You don't have to pay. We'll move it across into your structures, into your unit trust.
So they've allowed you title?
They're going to give us title. We don't need to pay for the rest. That's not even a caveat. There's a special wording for how they protect themselves. We don't have to pay for it until we get occupation certificate on the development. So then we also have 35 units going on there. So 35 units, 6 shops, a car park. We have signed contract on the 35 units, and that signed contract will give us a drawdown. Generally, if you have to build 35 units, you go get funding for it, you pay interest during the build, whatever. Our build will start. builder will send me an invoice. I will send it to the person giving them the 35 contracts. They will draw down on the value that they've paid for us. We will be left with the 6 commercial shops, a car park, and it would have cost us 0. So effectively, we're talking about $100 and something thousand of net cash flow for 0 and about $2.1 million worth of commercial value property.
You know what? I see you want to talk unicorn. Yes, every day of the week, right? But the reality of this, right? Because I can hear people going, oh yeah, and there's the greedy developers, rah, 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 rah. This is all about, no, it's not. You got that because of what you created with integrity. And this is how it plays out, right?
Correct. Relationships, integrity, and values.
Absolutely. Every single day of the week. So the focus wasn't on what I'm getting for nothing. The focus was on what I'm giving, what I'm actually delivering. And there's a process that you went through to be able to do that. And not everyone sees things favorably in the time. So you've got to manage that as well. But what you got off the back of that is a reflection of what you actually gave. And that is how it works. Gold. Absolutely love it. That is amazing. That is absolutely amazing.
And my own favorite quote is, every day, given the decision to make a decision, take the uncomfortable option every time, because no level of success has ever been developed without some level of discomfort. And that all of this deal that all the people that have been part of this deal would not allow themselves to put themselves in risk. It's what they've seen in the past that they're coming to the table with. So
well done. Congratulations to you. That is exciting. And we'll get to see the end result of that as it unplays. Super excited. I'm gonna go and check it out. All right. It's a nice little trip. I'll go check that out, and hopefully you'll jump on and you'll tell us how that plays out for you in the future.
for sure.
Good job. Thank you very much. Appreciate you and your time as always. I look forward to seeing you soon. And I believe that's going to be in March, but we'll deliver those notes very shortly. Otherwise, everything, guys, will be put in the notes below. So you've got access to Ian. You know how to get in contact with him for whatever reason that is, whether it's investment or choice of living. Either way, it will be amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wow, that was amazing. Okay, so Ian has got so much to deliver. The wealth of knowledge, the journey he's been on through this, the evolution of, is absolutely incredible. But the wealth of knowledge and wisdom that he's got around this product, this industry, is insane. So if it's something that interests you, I really do encourage you to speak to him. And irrelevant to why it interests you, have that conversation. Okay, really do have that conversation. Ian is so passionate about compliance, okay, and is very passionate about everyone else being in that space. So you get out of the situation what it's worth, to be perfectly honest, but you're safe and secure in it. So you couldn't ask for much more, really. So very blessed to have had the time with him, speaking to him now. I am going to let you know he is coming to our boot camp in March. We are going to put details below for the boot camp. Super, super exciting. The boot camp is all around change. Okay, now, as you can see with Ian, there's a lot of change that's gone on. We're no different. Everything is about change. It's the evolution of it's what's next, what's possible, what's required, what's needed, what's our contribution, all of these things. Boot camp is going to be super, super exciting. It is in Brisbane. Like I said, all details will be down below, the dates and all of those things. I am going to say, get your seats, because this boot camp, again, as they all are, is very different to the previous one, but limited seats. We are limited by the bus. So please secure your seat. I very much look forward to seeing you all there. Ian's going to be there. So there'll be a little bit more about what's going on in this space, opportunities for some great questions. So work out what it is you want to know, because Ian's going to be there. Like I said, wealth of knowledge, he is the wisdom. So bring your questions along, and I look forward to seeing you in March. That's all from me. Bye for now.